Einstein said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Well, guess what? Today I will show you why. Well, let's imagine that you have £10,000 that you invest at a rate of return of 5%. Well, in the first year, the £10,000 that you invested will generate £500 for you. So let's imagine that the next year, instead of cashing out the 500, you reinvest it again. So basically, you invest £10,500. Well, the next year, you will make 5% on 10,500 instead of 5% on the 10,000 only. What it means is that you will make £525, so 500 on the 10,000 and 25 on the 500. While you will tell me it's not that big of a difference, but over the years, it's just massive. So let's see an example right now. So let's imagine that you have £10,000 that you want to invest and that you will expect a return of 7% per year, which is in line with the average of what happened in the last decades. And we will evaluate two scenarios. The first one, you will cash out all the returns every year and you will only keep investing the £10,000. The second one, you will reinvest all the interest that you will generate year over year. So in the first scenario, you invested £10,000. I will lock it using F4 and drag it up to year 35. So your realized return is basically the invested value multiplied by the interest rate, which is £700. Let me also drag it up to 2035. The second scenario, you will invest 10,000 in the first year and you will realize 7% of the 10,000. But in the second year, you will actually invest your 10,000 plus what you realized as a return, and you will make 7% of 10,700, which is 749. Now let's drag these two up to year 35 and see what happens. Okay, so as you can see very quickly, the realized returns start increasing year after year, and it starts reaching some incredibly high values. And if we compare the realized gains of the two scenarios across a period of 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 years, what you realize is that the gap between this and the scenario where you only cash out your returns is increasing actually. And for a 35 years period, the difference is actually 4 times. So basically, by reinvesting the interest, you make 4 times as much as if you were cashing out your investment over a period of 35 years. So the key takeaway here is pretty obvious. Basically, reinvesting the interest, which may seem to be a very small amount, will make your wealth grow massively and even faster year after year. So let's make the assumption that you will retire at the age of 60. And let's compare two scenarios. One where you start investing at 25 years old and the other where you start investing at 30 years old. Okay, so if we imagine a scenario where you started investing at 25 years old, you will need to invest 35 years to reach the age of 60. So here I laid out a table up to the year 35. And I already calculated this earlier. So what I will do is, at the end of every year, my wealth is basically the value that I invested plus the realized return. So it's the sum of these two. And let me just drag this up to year 35. So in this scenario, your wealth is estimated to be £106,000, which is 10 times what you invested, which is just massive. Now let's imagine that you invested at the age of 30 instead of the age of 25. So basically what will happen is that we will have the same table, but it will be shifted by 5 years. So for that, I will use the formula offset, and I will combine it with another formula that is called IFERROR. So if you're not interested in the formulas and you just want to see the result, I recommend you to skip forward to see the result. Otherwise, you can follow with me. So basically, what I will use is the formula offset. And what this formula does is that it returns the value of a cell relative to the position of another cell that we provide to the formula. So in our case, what we want is just to basically shift these same values by 5 years, because we will have the same investment profile, the same return. The only difference is that we start 5 years later. So what I will do is I will add the formula offset. I will give it as a reference the cell that I want to start calculating from. And then I have two arguments that I need to enter. The first one is the rows. So basically what the formula asks is, do I need to move in the rows? And you can add a positive value if you want to go down, and you can add a negative value if you want to go up. In our case, we want it to stay on the same row, so I will put 0. Now for the columns, what you do is you add the number of columns that you want to move with. And again, you use a positive value if you want to move on the right-hand side. And you want to use a negative value if you want to go on the left-hand side. So in our case, we want it to go back by 5 years. So I will put minus and I will put 5. Now, this formula will just give you the value in the cell. Like the value can be a number, it can be a text. So in our case, like if I do 1 here, just for the example, what it will give me is this cell which says invest at 25 years old. So if I close it and press enter, as you can see, I have the value invest at 25 years old. So now I have basically two issues with my formula. The first issue is I don't want it to return a text. I only want it to return numbers. And the second issue is if I go back by 5 columns, in some cases, I will not find a cell. So for example, here I am in column D. If I go back by 1, 2, 3, I'm already in column A. So if I go back by the 4th cell, I will be like outside my Excel worksheet, which will return an error. So I want to solve for these two. So the first thing that I will do is I will add the formula if error. So this formula basically will give me the value if everything is well, but if there is an error, I can choose what value to display. So in our case, we will probably put 0. This one will solve the issue where I am like outside the worksheet, but it doesn't solve the issue where I have a text. And for that, what I will do is basically just add here a minus, because what will happen is that Excel will try to calculate minus a text, which will provide an error and which will then make our if error formula work well. But then what I want to do is add another minus outside, because here I will have negative values for the numbers, and I will add another minus to have them positive again. And as you can see now here, it's 0, and we can move forward. Now let me just correct this to 5 years instead of 1, and we can drag our formula up to 2035. And as you can see, we have nothing in the first 5 years, and we only start investing and generating returns in year 6 onwards. Okay, so now that we have made the calculation, let's see what is the difference between the two scenarios. So for a 5 years gap in a 35 years period, what happens is that I have a gap of 30,000 pounds. So this is actually the power of compounding, is that every year you start with the value of your wealth that is way higher than the year before, and basically the interest that you make is higher than the one that you make in the year before, and it's exponential. So every additional year, the impact of the additional year will be higher than the impact of the previous year, and this is why the gap keeps increasing. So let's put it into a nice graph so that we can also visualize this number. As you can see here, and we can really clearly see it, is that so the blue line is the one where you start investing early, and the orange line is the one where you start investing late. And as you can see, in the beginning, the gap is not that big, but the more the years pass, the more the gap is higher between the one that invested at 25 years old and the one that invested at 30 years old. When they will reach retirement, what will happen is that The person who invested 5 years before will have a wealth that is almost 30 to 40% higher than the person who invested at 30 years old. Okay, so I hope that this video was helpful to you and that you understand the concept of compound interest. And I hope that next time when you will think of cashing out your returns, you will think twice before doing it. Now, until next time, take care.